It has come to our attention that a mysterious force is loose somewhere in outer space.
The mysteries of creation are there.
Up in the sky?
Up in the sky.
The moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
Because no one would believe that we could possibly do what we're setting out to do. But I often say, if you don't think we can live 1,000 days on this boat at sea, breathing fresh air, going where we want to go, catching fish, eating good food, then how do they expect to put a group of humans in a tiny little space capsule and send them to Mars for 1,000 days? They don't hardly have any examples of that humans could put up with that. So I'd like to think people would give us the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sure we're going to draw a heart that anyone in the world will be able to recognize, and it will be verifiable by our satellite.
More like this.
With our ability to control our minds, that we'll be able to do this voyage. If we keep thinking we have to come back for cheeseburgers and ice cream, we're not going to be able to do it. But if we realize that we are connected to the ocean in a certain way, and then we become in tune to our environment, then we'll be able to successfully adapt out there and have a good voyage. Ready, come on.
Maybe reading, you know, just looking around. Every few minutes we'll be, you know, looking up and out.
4 boxes of lentils, box of prunes. Got it all marked exactly where everything is in the boat, all the different labels of where everything is.
Here's the equator. When we cross the equator, we'll be pushed due to the wind and the currents to the coast of South America.
I think I'll probably just miss a hot shower the most. The small comforts in life, you know. Unlimited hot running water, you know, that might be the only thing I miss most. Or oh yes, and also doing laundry in a machine.
Hey, Reid, welcome to the OffWorldly podcast. How are things?
Everything is really great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. I think we have, honestly, a really exciting episode and a really exciting story because it's taking space training to a very unforgiving place on Earth, which is the ocean. For our guests today, I want you to kind of imagine this 70-foot schooner or a sailboat, and you're far from land, riding out the storms in the open ocean. There's arguably no resupply, no port calls, just a small crew, a self-contained world, and a mission to see how far human beings can really go. And that's the world of Mars Ocean Analogs, a program that uses long-duration expeditions at sea to train and select future Mars explorers. And my guest today is the gentleman behind it, Reid Stowe. He is an artist, a mariner, a builder, whose life work has blurred the line between expedition, engineering, and human psychology, turning a lifetime of sea stories, art, and extreme voyaging into something bigger, which is a pathway for future analog astronauts and curious humans who want to test themselves in an unforgiving environment, which is the ocean. Now, Reid is best known for an extraordinary feat, his 1,000 Days at Sea voyage aboard the schooner Anne. And he stayed out in the open sea for little over 1,100 days without resupply, without stepping onto land. And this journey is widely cited as one of the longest continuous sea voyages of its kind. Reid, I just want to welcome you again to the OffWorldly podcast.
Thank you very much.
Before we dive into Mars, ocean analogs, and astronaut training, I think it's really helpful to rewind a bit and understand more about you. I think none of this really makes sense until you understand the kind of person who decides to build his own boat and essentially disappear into the horizon for months, even years at a time. From what I've read, Reid, and keep me honest here because the internet can lie. You grew up bouncing around between Air Force bases internationally, summers on the intercoastal. Could you share a little bit about what it was like growing up before all of the expeditions and voyages?
When I stepped off the boat, after not seeing land for 1,152 days, I stepped up to the microphone. Well, I knew I was going to cry, and I had my little speech ready. I'm emotional like that, so I wrote the letters in big Sharpie black. But the first thing I said was, I did what no man has ever done through the power of family love. So now that goes back to your first question. What was it like growing up with the family? And I had real good security in my life because I had wonderful parents, a wonderful family, wonderful grandparents, and an extended family around me, which gave me great support in every way to become who I am. So that family love taught me that I could be who I wanted to be and that I would get help doing that in any way, and that I was taught proper manners and respect and gratitude, and to go forward like that, I could get what I wanted. So that grounding and that basis is extremely important for my character and how I grew up. It certainly scared my parents to death. But they gave me the go-ahead to do everything that I did from the very beginning, even as a teenager when I went to Hawaii. And I went to Hawaii to go surfing. I was an extreme athlete. I loved the water. I was scuba diving since I was 12. But I met another teenager who had a sailboat in Hawaii. And he said, Reid, why don't you come with me and we'll sail this boat off into the South Pacific? And I said, yes, that's great. But I had to call my parents and I had to say, Mom and Dad, I have an opportunity. I want to drop out of college and I want to sail off into the South Pacific. Please mail me my birth certificate so I can get a passport. So right away, they had to accept that I wasn't going to be like everyone else in the college and in my family and get a college degree. And I was also going to go off into the wild where they would have no control over me, where I could die. Yeah. And, in the mail, there came my birth certificate so I could get my passport. They could have said, no, finish college first. Then you can do what you want to do. We'll help you, whatever. No, they let me do what I wanted to do and they supported me. So that was the important aspect, I think, that answers what you're saying, is that I was raised by a loving family to believe I could do anything. And well, that got me going because my dad was very strict. And I knew since I was a tiny child, if I acted up at all, I would get a thump on my head and it would hurt. So I always acted real good, and didn't think twice about the reason why I acted good and why I acted respectful towards my mom and why I wanted to please my mom and dad.
Well, let's pause there because there's a lot to unpack, frankly. It seems like that influence from your parents, because you typically have two types of parents, right? You have the overbearing, overprotective parents who are more of the controlling demeanor in someone's life, or you have the opposite, the parents who are, which seems to be your upbringing, right? They let you make your own choices, make your own mistakes, and push you towards the dreams that you had. But you said your father was strict, so explain that. When you passed along this idea to travel.
Well, my granddad was even more strict, and my father was very strict. He was an Air Force officer. I followed the rules. I marched in line, and I marched in line all my life. And I look back at it, and there was never a time when I hesitated. When granddad, grandmom, or mom or dad said, "Reid, do this," I said, "Yes, sir," and I did it. And that was what I was taught. And that's why I had the support when I was a little older. I said, I know what I want to do now. And they supported me. So that was what made it possible for me to build my boats on the family property on the Intercoastal Waterway in North Carolina with the family support in big ways, because I proved myself one step of the way each time, and they were supportive of that.
It's an incredible story, and I think that really is the heart of this conversation, because without that support, without your family, none of your accomplishments, even this conversation today, may not be happening.
That's right. At the time, I didn't realize how unique it was, but I don't think there's too many young people who are enabled and trained and skilled enough to build their own boat that can go anywhere in the world, and to be able to have a place to do it and help in various ways to do it. And so it's very unique, and I'm very lucky that was the situation.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about this first boat that you built. Was there a problem that you were trying to solve when you were kind of deciding to build your own vessel? And I also want to talk a little bit about the hands-on skills, right? Who taught you these skills, right? The building, the fixing, was all this self-taught, or did you have mentors in the beginning?
My dad and granddad were right there with me while they built our family beach house. And since I was a tot, they taught me how to sharpen knives and use a plane and how to work with tools. They trained me to be very conscientious, and they trained me to do things right. And I took an interest to it. And they took the time to train me and were the example for building and so forth. And my dad built some boats, and my granddad built some boats. So I learned from them as a tot about using tools and setting up a shop and keeping things clean and all of that sort of stuff.
And why did you decide to start building boats versus going out and acquiring something used or
Well,
something new? Like where did that influence come from?
there's two things. First of all, it's way cheaper to build your own boat, and I knew I had the skill. So, and I didn't have all the money to buy a boat. So I knew that I could rally help if I built a boat. Now, and I had the skill to build a boat, I had the place to build the boat and the support around me to build the boat. But I want to bring something in here right now that's very important. When I was 19 and I sailed the South Pacific, I met the greatest sailors in the world. I met the first man to sail around the world without stopping. He was the master whose mind said, he said to me, well, you can go to sea and you can just be where you are and look at the beauty of the ocean and not think of the land. So that went into my mind as a teenager. Now, he sailed alone. It went into my mind that I could do this alone. And there was a group of people and sailors around him. And though I was only 19 and they were all older than me, they saw my enthusiasm to learn, and they all helped me. And at the same time as I was learning seamanship and navigation from them, they also handed me books and said, here, read Carl Jung. Here, read these great books on the mind. And here, read, and they all did yoga. and they taught me yoga as a teenager. So it was about learning to control your mind and your body, learning to focus, learning to meditate, and understanding how the mind is not stuck in your intellectual place of who you are, but that you're a larger soul who can see things from a larger perspective when you learn how to meditate and connect as one with your boat and connect as one with the ocean. Then you have better capabilities to sail on the sea. I was taught that when I was a teenager by the greatest sailors in the world, and I took to it naturally. I was already an extreme athlete. I was already, a hero in my mind. I was the pitcher and captain of the first place Little League baseball team out of 25 teams, and I pitched a perfect game. So I already had a connection to excelling and taking that spot of being the hero and getting newspaper press when I was 12 years old. So I always lived up to that, and I thought I could do what I could do and rallied people around me to help do that. So those things that they taught me. Now I'm getting back to the question. I knew if I built a boat, I could build a magical boat, because a boat that's built by men who come to the factory, they come for money. But when I built my boat, the people who came to help me build my boat came for love and came for dreams. And I knew they were going to put that into the boat and make the boat a living boat. And also, I had very well the skills. I knew that when I adjusted my plane, that I loved my plane. And my plane was going to respond to me. And through my plane, when I stroked that wood to put the bevel on it to meet the next plank, I stroked it with love. And I knew the next plank was going to meet it by love. And therefore, I knew I could build a magical boat. And I knew that when I built my first boat when I turned 20. So I had a gift where I was able to empower what I was doing. And that was all a lot through the support of the family. Though they didn't quite understand where I was going, I had that gift. And that gift was nurtured by some very skillful people. That's why I built a boat.
And that's rare. I think it's rare for anyone to recognize that skill set and that gift in themselves at a very young age. Typically, it's not until later in life that people truly understand themselves and their skills, or maybe they build those skills along the way. But your story seems more intrinsic, where you always felt this way. You always had these skills because you grew up, right? You had the mentors, you had the support, you had the knowledge, and that just kind of progressed your journey as it developed over time.
That's what I want to say. And this is an important aspect to remember while we talk about everything that happens. I never saw it as a challenge or a feat. I saw it as myself evolving, that I was growing into these things. So by the time I conceived of doing the longest nonstop sea voyage in history, I realized that I had evolved to the place where I was the one who was meant to do it. And I had the background to it and so forth. So it was more that it was realizing that was the natural thing and that I could do it if I just kept doing what I'd always done. What I'd always done was did things conscientiously, skillfully, and boldly, and not thinking about the sort of things that get into people's minds that distract them from being into their greater capabilities.
Well, that's key, right? Because most people hear, 3 years at sea without touching land and immediately think, well, I don't know, right? This might not be for me. But your voyage, it wasn't just about endurance. It was a kind of
Exactly.
analog mission in itself, but before even analog missions really became a thing, right?
It
So
was
like
before that.
I want to understand. So when did the idea first come into your head where you said, okay, listen, I'm going to stay at sea for 1,000+ days straight? What was it? A single conversation? Was it a slow build or a dare? What was that catalyst?
Well, I built myself into the person who could have that vision where when I sailed, I didn't care about where I was going. I wasn't into sightseeing. I wasn't into seeing countries or people. I grew up with my dad in the Air Force, so we traveled. We lived in Germany for 3 years, the Philippines for 2. We traveled a lot. So by the time I started sailing as a teenager, it wasn't that I wanted to travel to see places. Yes, there's interesting places that I sailed to with different cultures, but what I was concerned about was more, am I getting to be a good navigator? Am I going to make this boat more seaworthy at sea while I'm sailing? And when I hit port, am I going to make it ready for another longer voyage? So I was always thinking those things. So by the time that I had a chance, the opportunity that to design and build the ultimate long distance heavy weather sailboat, which I did at my family home, I knew that I was wanting a boat that could be sailed anywhere in the world, ride out the biggest storms, and stay there indefinitely and be repaired along the way. So the idea was already in my head, and I built the boat to go to Antarctica. And my mom was totally supportive. She kept coming to me. She was finding books for me. She gave me a book with the whole history of all the expeditions to Antarctica for me to read while I was building the boat. So while I was building the boat, I was reading the stories about these people, the first people to go there, and what they went through and how they survived or didn't survive. And that was what I built into the boat. And that I was knowing that I was building a boat that could do something that no other boat could do, because I was putting that into the boat with my mind. And I was putting that into the mind of everyone who came to help me. And they came to help me for love. My brothers and sisters, we have a photo when the boat was just starting, and there's 15 people in the photo, including my grandmother was there, and everyone was helping do something to get the boat built. So I inspired people with the dream. They came with love to make that dream go. So I built the boat. So the boat was in the right position. So the moment that you're asking about is I was in New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand in 1986, and I was preparing to go to Antarctica. Just a side note, why did I go to Auckland, New Zealand? Because I couldn't find anyone for a year who wanted to go to Antarctica with me. And I said, well, all of the expeditions in the past, they mostly started from New Zealand. So I got to go there because there'll be people with it in their head that Antarctica is a place you can go to. Before in 86, no one thought of going there. So no one who I knew had it in their head. So I had to go to New Zealand. So when I went to New Zealand, then I met people it was in their culture that expeditions go to Antarctica. So they wanted to go with me. That was why I was in Auckland, New Zealand, why I went there. And as I was preparing to go to Antarctica, I said, well, what can I do next? And I said, what can I do next whereby I will evolve? Because there was really no sailing that you could do more visionary and dangerous and skilled than sailing to Antarctica. So I said, well, what can I do next? And then I said, well, I'm all set. I can do the longest sea voyage in history. I've always been preparing the boat to go to sea and keep going. And I had been mentored by the first man to do the first longest nonstop sea voyage in history. So I said, well, I can do the longest sea voyage in history. I can live on the sea instead of on the land. And all I have to do is keep doing what I've been doing all my life. And I liked doing that, and I was good at it. So I said, how long was he at sea? He was at sea for 310 days. So I said, gosh, I can go twice as long as that. And I started to do the numbers in my head. And in my mind, when I was visualizing the numbers, I saw a slot machine spinning, and it spun and it stopped on 0, 0, 0, 1. And I said, 1,000. And then I thought, well, 1,000 days, it's only a little more than 3 times as long as he went. 1,000 days is a good number. And that was how I got the 1,000 number that I planned on doing the longest sea voyage in history. And I was going to do 1,000 days nonstop at sea. That was the moment when I considered it. And it made the Antarctic voyage far easier. If you looked at the Antarctic voyage as the ultimate thing to do, that's your challenge. But because I had thought of the 1,000-day voyage, when I was preparing for the Antarctic voyage, I was thinking, well, we need this much food to go to Antarctica. We're going to get all of it. And I was thinking, how much will I need to go 1,000 days? I made the boat seaworthy to go to Antarctica. And I said,
Yeah.
well, what am I going to have to do differently to go 1,000 days? So the Antarctic, throughout the whole Antarctic voyage, I was always thinking of how I was going to go on the 1,000-day voyage, and it made the Antarctic expedition easier.
So you didn't have a ceiling. You didn't put a ceiling on yourself or what you could do. You thought that, well, you're like, oh, Antarctica's too easy, or I could do that. Why not spend 1,000 days at sea? And rather than capping your potential, you left yourself limitless in that way, which allowed you to undertake those ventures.
Yeah, the inspiration for the 1,000-day voyage empowered the Antarctic voyage.
Well, earlier too, you were talking about kind of as you were designing the boat, right? What first comes to mind when you are doing that designing? Is it, how do you account for the safety, the reliability, the simplicity? What goes into that thinking as you prepare for those voyages, whether it's Antarctica or whether it's this 1,000-day voyage?
Well, when I started sailing, like I said, I sailed with good people. I had great mentors, and I read books and I talked to them. We all talked about what was the most seaworthy boat and what was boats that weren't seaworthy. That was a lot of the conversation. And then of course I studied boat design. I studied boat building. I did some work in boat yards along the way. I did that when I was in New Zealand. I was looking at boats and doing some work there in boat yards, doing a bit of work in a sail loft to learn that. And so I was learning what makes a boat seaworthy for the ultimate storm, not what makes a boat fast, not what makes a boat be a beautiful yacht on the bay, but what makes a boat seaworthy. So there's certain tendencies that you want to put into a boat, basically to see a boat as a bottle floating on the water with a keel on the bottom, everything sealed down, and that boat can ride any storm and any wave because it breaks over the boat. If you have a tall cabin on the boat, that tall cabin will cause windage, and a wave hitting it might break it or break the windows. So you want small windows. You don't want much of a cabin. So I learned what makes the most seaworthy boat, and that was what I had in mind to build, a boat that could be seaworthy and ride any storm. And the ability to repair the boat at sea has to do with more of a low tech than a high tech. And then also, what were the first boats to actually spot Antarctica? What was the first boat to actually sail across the north of Canada? They tried to do that and they lost a lot of boats across the north of Canada. What was the first boat to do that? And what was the first boat to spot Antarctica? Those were the greatest challenge of the age of exploration for discovering the furthest places in the world. And I said,
Sure.
that's got to be the strongest and best type of boat. And then it also turned out to be the cheapest type of boat that I could build, because then I realized, hey, I can chop down my own trees and make some solid masts. And I see the rigging. Oh, they have rolls of rigging in the junkyard. I can get it for nothing. And the boat has to be ballasted with thousands of pounds of ballast. Oh, I can get that at the junkyard and put it in the bottom of the keel.
So you were thrifty and very intelligent when it came to, you took cues from all of these other past voyages.
I did my
Yeah.
history. I did my studying. I did my talking and saw what type of boats and what type of people did it and so forth.
Do you think that's rare today? I think people today personally don't put that much effort into something that they're doing. Do you think what you did, early on, those skills, that fortitude, do you think that's a rare quality to have these days?
Well, I would say so. And I didn't realize it when I was doing it. I thought, surely there's other people doing it. I'm not the only one. But as the years went by, I started to look and see, well, how many guys did build a boat? How many guys did go to far places in the world. And how many guys were able to sustain that for a number of years or a lifetime? I don't know. I can't say it for sure, but I don't think there's anybody who's built their own boat and sailed to Antarctica, or built their own boat and been sailing it for all their lives, still sailing, still going, still managing to do it, still loving the sea, still
Right.
keeping that
You'd have to
lifestyle.
go back to the days of Shackleton, and even he had help. I don't even know if he built his
Yeah.
own boat. I think
No,
that
his boat was a big ship.
it was
A big boat. No, he didn't build it personally. Yeah. But the real explorer, you mentioned Shackleton. People mention him a lot. He's kind of famous. The consummate explorer is Amundsen. Amundsen is a Norwegian man, and Amundsen did everything the right way, the toughest way. He learned from the people who went before him, and he did everything in the most skillful way without disasters and mishaps. Amundsen was the first man to sail across the north of Canada. They tried that for hundreds of years. He did it in a boat not much bigger than mine and of the same style. My schooner that I designed and built is a gaff rig schooner. It's a traditional style boat. The style of boat that I copied to build my boat is from the mid 1800s. And that was the type of boat that he was the first person to sail the north of Canada. And the other great feat that he did was he was the first person to the South Pole. So a lot of people tried that and they couldn't get close. And he figured out how to do it in a very good way, and he did it very successfully. So he is one of my main influences on what I do.
that's really cool. I personally I don't have a big history of these early
Yeah,
voyagers. I think that's important to
that was
share. Were there any other figures that, you kind of looked up to as mentors during this time?
Yeah, very much so. Of course, the first man to sail alone around the world was Joshua Slocum. And he's an American, and he was a great sailor of big square riggers. And at the turn of the century, the steamships put the square riggers out of business, and he lost his job. So he was walking up in New England, and he saw a boat uh, that was sitting on the shore, and he said, I can fix that boat up and I can sail that boat around the world by myself. And so, with his skill, he's a consummate sailor, knew how to navigate, of course, and he fixed up this little sailboat and was the first man to sail around the world by himself every step of the way. He wrote a great book, Sailing Alone Around the World. It's a classic. But he's the first man who said, hey, I want to go sailing across the ocean for my own fun, for my own challenge, just to do it. They didn't do it before that time. No one was capable of thinking they could do it. It wasn't possible physically, but a retired great sea captain thought of it. And with his skills, he did it. And he led the way for all the sailors now who are sailing on the oceans. The next man, it went right to Bernard Montessier for me, and he was the one who was the first man to sail around the world without stopping. He even named his boat Joshua after Joshua Slocum. Bernard Montessier was the first man to sail around the world without stopping. That was also a great visionary feat, a skillful feat, and both of them did it ultimately super skilled, and everything went well. But I had my direct influence from Bernard Montessier. So in a sense, if you look at it, I'm the next in line who's carrying it to another level. So they were my big influences, and from them, I took my vision further.
Yeah. What was it competitive in nature, or was it more the excitement of completing that type of voyage? Like for you, I mean, keep me honest, it seems like it was more intrinsic early on versus competitive in nature, or did it get competitive during those
No,
early times,
no, it was not competitive at all. They were my fathers guiding me, and I was going on, and I never saw it as competition or a challenge. I saw it as a place that I could naturally grow into by doing what I've been doing well and loving, and just doing it a little bit longer than I had before.
Yeah. I want to pause there because that's an important mindset to have, right? Looking at those who are quote unquote better than you, or doing something in a way that you wish yourself or see yourself doing. And instead of looking at them as competitors or competition, you decided to look at these individuals as leaders, right? As fathers, as, individuals who can actually teach you and who you can learn from. And I think that's really important, especially today with, social media and everything, right? As you're scrolling through even LinkedIn, right? It's really hard as you're looking at other people's accomplishments to stop and pause and look at them and say, well, how do I do that? Or how do I work with them, versus being envious, right? Or making it competitive in nature. So I think that's a really important mindset to have and to carry forward, particularly for newer generations.
Yes, it is. And this is hitting a lot with the core of our subject, because we're talking about my specialty, where I have that territory, is long duration space psychology. How do you prepare to live for 3 years in space? And that is how what I've done, it applies to that directly, just the way we're talking about it as a course of evolution rather than training to do something you haven't done before. I'm saying the people that lead the way should be people who evolve into the place where they're naturally the ones leading the way, rather than having to train someone to deal with coping with the problems that they see that there's going to be.
What was the first day like when you departed from this voyage? Was it a spectacle? Was it a quiet send off? Could you talk me through sort of that departure and the early days?
I was always scrambling. I got things donated and I got help, but I never had what I needed, not one step of the way. And so I was scrambling, and I spoke of the moment that I conceived of going, and I said I was going to do the longest nonstop sea voyage in history. It was 21 years later before I set off. Now, you
Wow.
want to talk about what happened during those 21 years? I was up against every obstacle you could imagine that I had to go forward. And yet I kept believing in what I was doing, and my passion grew, and I loved it more and more.
How did you do that? How did you not lose faith in that goal?
Well, as I say, it was my evolution that I saw, and it was my life doing what I loved to do. So the more I kept my mind on the goal, the more I was lifted to a more visionary, wise state. And I was also being empowered physically by that, because having a big old sailboat is hard work. And I was up to it, and I was doing it, and I was proving myself every step of the way, and I wasn't seeing anyone getting close to me on all of those levels, not on the level of physicality and the hard work that I had to do and the persistence that I had to do, and not on the level of the mind, what I was seeing, what I was comprehending, why I was doing it.
Was that discouraging or empowering?
It was empowering, but certainly I had to live with um, obstacles of all kinds, people putting me down and so forth. So you see, I conceived of it in 86, 87. I did the Antarctic expedition, and so I didn't leave on what I had set as my goal until 207, 20 years later.
Wow.
And for those 20 years, if you would have met me in those 20 years, I would have said, "Hi, I'm Reid. I did my Antarctic expedition on my boat, and I'm preparing to do 1,000 days nonstop at sea, the longest sea voyage in history. And like, are you interested? Do you think you want to come? And also, like, Do you know how I can get this or that? Or can you help me figure out this electrical problem? That was my only focus in all those years. And it grew and it grew. And as it grew, I started to realize, hey, wait a minute. I'm the man. I'm doing what no one's ever done before. There's no one who I can ask. What's it like? How can I do it? I could ask small things like, I want to know better how to figure out how to wire my solar panels or things like that. But there was no one who I could ask. And as I got better at doing what I was doing, taking longer sea voyages, I gained more and more skills. And pretty soon I realized, well, by doing this voyage, I would depart the touch of the land and the sight of the land longer than any human ever had. And I saw that as I would be leading the evolution of humanity off of the earth, because I was going to go live off of the earth far longer than anyone ever had. How was I going to do it? What was I going to think about to do it? There's all the physical things, the seamanship, the physical parts of the boat, the physical parts of the body. But how was I going to prepare my mind for that? So for 20 years, I prepared my mind. Now I'm just going to add something in. And I started thinking, humanity, the real, I think, and this is about off of the earth, what your show is about. The highest goal in humanity right now is to send humans to Mars. That is the pinnacle of thinking, the pinnacle of everything they're doing in space is to be able to get people to Mars. There's a lot of reasons, and there's a lot that's happening up in space along the way. That the thrust to send people to Mars certainly helped get the idea that AI will be better if the factories are up in space. But that's because they're thinking humans are going to go out there and they're going to live at Mars. So where the money and the genius is going to is to send humans to Mars. And that's the most important thing that humanity is working on right now.
Do you think that thinking is too small? Like, should we be thinking bigger? Are we not setting enough goals for ourselves, like from a evolutionary standpoint?
Well, I think that there is people thinking that humanity will, and they have thought that for years, humanity will venture out into the stars. So it's pretty well inevitable. People say, why do that? Let's take care of Earth. But the people that are thinking of venturing out into the stars are also doing a lot of things to help take care of the Earth. So we're doing that too. But I think that any nation or people that don't look at as far as their mind can conceive are not going to have the better ability to take care of themselves in the moment where they are, because if their mind is only looking at the problems right in front of them, they're not getting the inspiration and knowledge and wisdom they can get for thinking about how they can go further. And when they think about how they can go further, they learn all these things that are what they need now. So it's inevitable that we'll be doing that. And the 20 years that I spent in preparation, look at the trillions of dollars that's spent for going into space. I think I'm concerned that they're going to send people out in space who haven't been prepared. They won't be as tough as I am. I spent 20 years trying as hard as I could in every way to do what I did until I knew I was going to do it. I knew I could. I knew I was the only man.
That's a fear of mine too. I love these ideas of putting hotels on the moon and space tourism. But one of my old professors used to joke, he used to say, hey, would you trust Kim Kardashian out on the moon on a lunar expedition, right? And it was kind of it was a joke, right? But at the same time, the joke was meant to help you understand that space was hard, and it's not meant for everyone or anyone for that matter. And if you're going to put yourself into that environment, you want to be with people not only that are trusting in themselves, but also trusting in one another. And I think you're right. I don't think that we're building the skills at mass that we need to go among the stars collectively. I think we're doing that in small cohorts, right? NASA was doing that historically. Now they're turning that venture over to commercial space the last 2 decades. So, right, so you're seeing that growth of analog astronaut missions and astronaut training. And I know we're going to get into that in a little bit. So maybe we'll pick this point up later. But I think more needs to be done to train everyday people just on even common skills today. Basic woodworking, basic electrical work, all of those skills that assumably you had to learn when you were going through this build early on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's rare, and frankly, that's part of what I'm hoping to build with Offworldly as well, is a network of resources. Those resources could be individuals like yourself, or they could be the skills, the tools, right, to help create that foundation for otherworldly, off-worldly explorers in the future. What did it feel like the first, you're out at sea, right? Those first few days, the few weeks, when does the novelty of it wear off, and when does that routine kind of kick in? Can you talk about the mental state a little bit?
Well, one of the first things that was very intense that I can remember about setting off, and the very day I set off, the very day I sailed out of sight of land, I remember standing in the pilot house, in the center of the pilot house, and leaning back against where my wood stove was. And I went into this state of, I am so grateful. I am so grateful. I didn't say I'm grateful that I finally set off, or I'm grateful that I'm here. I didn't know what it was, but I was just consumed by a state of thankfulness and grace. And that state of thankfulness and grace became a big, big part of me going forward. So now when you imagine me going forward into the unknown, because from day one, I was going into the unknown, because my mind was set on going way beyond where any human had gone. That was my mindset. So from day one, I was going into the unknown, and grace overwhelmed me. And I lived in that grace. And I naturally did what I had to do to go forward. So what I had to do to go forward was what I had done all my life. So that was what I was doing.
Yeah. You already succeeded before you even set out on that voyage, it seems. The voyage was almost, it was, I'm trying to think of the words, but the voyage was in itself not the end of that journey. It was almost the beginning. In a way, you had come full circle, right? You had spent those 20 plus years getting to that point, and by the time you got to that point, you were already a master at what you were doing. So the voyage itself, and keep me honest here, but was it easy in a sense that you already had that mentality, the skills, or were there challenges along the way that were unforeseen?
I knew that I was going to have to do repairs, and I knew that there would be difficulties and so forth. But, I tore my sails pretty early on. And that was because, yes, I was donated a set of sails, but that was 10 years before I left. And I wore those sails out before I left.
Wow.
And I couldn't get more, you see, but I had backups of older sails, and I knew how to repair my sails on the spot. So I started sewing my sails. So I had to do that quite early on in the voyage. And so it was no surprise to me that it was a lot of work. But it's what I do. You see, when I left on the voyage, I was already sore and tired from working so hard to get to the starting line. I couldn't pick up a grinder anymore because I had been grinding to build my bigger water tanks and to get the hull ready. And I had already been pounding with the sledgehammer to get the motor lined up properly. I was already sore when I left. My hands were already, to a certain extent, physical. But then I would say that I was sore from athleticism. And everyone knows that if you, for instance, did a triathlon or even played a football game, you're sore after the game. And that's not a bad thing, actually. It doesn't actually feel bad. You're sore, you're in a little bit of pain, but there's some satisfaction in it. So, but I had that all the time. I had it
It's a
before I
good
left.
sore, right? It's
It's
like
a
you're
good
coming back
sore.
from the gym
It's,
and
yeah,
you're sore,
yeah,
but you're accomplished.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's a good sore. So I was sore. Well, that came from the question of, was there any surprises mentally or physically? No, I knew I was going to have to work. My tool trunks are bolted to the floor in my pilot house, right there in the center of my command station. In the center of my command station, with my eyes closed, I can probably grab one of 1,000 things in under 30 seconds. I had it organized. I could do it in the dark. And because I was alone, no one touched my tools or put them in where they didn't belong or where I didn't want them. I was responsible for that. And nothing bothered me more than to not get what I wanted the moment I put my hand where it was supposed to be. So I was always very conscientious about that, because I needed a plethora of tools and things to do what I did. So it was all right there in the pilot house with me.
For those of us who aren't familiar with sailboats and the logistics involved, could you give a little description of the boat, the different compartments, and maybe how you kind of laid things out?
Okay. Well, as I said, it's a gaff rig schooner. Everyone knows what a gaff rig schooner looks like. They might not know it by name, but there's a gaff rig schooner on the back of the Canadian dime. That's how important they were. Gaff rig schooners in the history of American sailing are hands down the most important boat in the building of our nation. That style of boat is gaff rig because it has a gaff on top of the sail to pull it up. That was in the days when they used trees for masts. They didn't develop glues and the technology good enough to build the tall masts that you see now until into the 1900s. Before that, it was chop down the tree, make a mast, make a boom, make a gaff. And that was the kind of boat that I'm sailing, as a gaff rig schooner. So the first thing I thought of is it has to be round to ride the waves. Well, modern sailboats now are flat, like a surfboard with a long, deep keel. They go way faster. They zoom, but they can't carry a cargo. And they're not as good for riding storms. And if they do flip over, it's like a surfboard. You need to flip it back over. But my boat is like a round bottle with a deep keel. And my keel is 10 foot deep, and I have 42,000 pounds of junkyard steel cast into the bottom of the keel, so that when it holds the mast up when the boat is sailing. But if the boat does get knocked over or turned over by waves, the boat naturally stands back up like a toy. So you, like I said already, you want to have no high structures on it. You want it to be low. I wanted all of the windows in the boat to be small. They all have thick double glass and plexiglass so that they can't break. So that what I'm trying to build is a watertight bottle, and the shape of it has to be good enough to sail properly. And that men worked on that for 1,000 years. And I said, well, here's where the Americans developed the best boat of their time in the mid 1800s, sailed it to England and beat everyone in Europe in racing and sailing, because the Americans figured out how to make the hull shape and how to make the mast and sails to make the best sailing boat. That was a gaff rig schooner. That was the design that I copied. I say I copied it because there was a lot of different ways to do it. You could put the mast further apart, closer together, and then you look at the boat could have a lot of curve, or the boat could be straight. There's different parts to it that I look to say, what do I like? Why do I think it'll be worth? And the boat is divided into 3 watertight compartments with doors to go through. It's rougher to be on the front of the boat than in the back of the boat, because when the boat is sailing, there's more motion in the front and it's hitting waves in the front. So most of the storage goes up front, but you don't want the weight that's put in the boat, because I put in 1,000 gallons of water, and I put in over 3 years worth of food, and I packed it in the cargo hold in the very middle as low as possible. So the ends of the boat are left light so they can rise up and move in the middle of the boat. Down deep is where the cargo is placed, and the pilot house is low. And while I was building the boat, I said, how high do I want it versus how low? And I stood on planks in a filigree of steel and imagined, well, if it's too low, I can't see over the bow. What's the use of having a cabin if I can't see over the bow? And it's up a little higher. I don't want it too high, and that sort of thing. So the pilot house is my command station. It has an interior wheel, so I can steer from the inside when it's freezing cold and stormy. And it has an exterior wheel in the cockpit, and they're connected together. When one turns, the other one turns too. So that I could be inside to drive the boat. And I knew I wanted the boat to go anywhere in the world. So even before we launched the boat, I had a wood-burning fireplace mounted in the pilot house to keep us warm and dry our things. And of course, in the old days, the boats that sailed had to have some kind of form of wood-burning stove, because that was the only thing they had for cooking their food. So all of the ships had wood-burning stoves inside, really for cooking the food for the crew. So sailboats have always had them. And
What did you bring? Did you have a lot of canned food, dried
no
foods?
canned food whatsoever. I stocked up for over 3 years. It started that when the first guy from England said, I'm going to sail the fastest around the world, and he stopped in Sydney. Then it got to be, well, then he can't stop and resupply. So when they in England, they had the Golden Globe, which was the first time a newspaper sponsored it. They said, okay, we're going to have a race around the world without stopping. The rules are, if you're going to race around the world, you can't receive supplies, you can't stop, and you can't get help. So those rules were set up in the late 60s, because before that, no one was doing it. No one thought about doing a long voyage, because it was all commercial or fishing. There was no reason, or war. There was no reason to do a long voyage until Joshua Slocum sailed alone around the world, and Bernard Moitessier joined that race in England, the Golden Globe. The rules were you had to sail around the world without stopping, which meant that you had to sail in the Southern Ocean, and you had to sail under Africa and under Cape Horn, which is always known as the roughest place in the world. And you had to do it without resupply. So if I was going to do the longest sea voyage in history and get recognized by Guinness Book of World Record and by sailors and other people, I had to do it without resupply. So I knew that I had to carry all of the food with me that I was going to take. And I knew about that because I'd been eating the food all my life. And basically what I had sailed on in the past was rice and beans and dried food. No expensive food, no camping food, no packaged food. I was basic. It was rice and beans and pasta and oats, lots of oats and fruits and nuts and so forth. And I realized early on that certain foods like onions and cabbage last the longest. Cabbage will last for weeks or a month or more. So if you're doing a long sea voyage, you're ending out eating a lot of cabbage before the voyage is over. But I knew that I'd run out of fresh food after 30 or 40 days, and I was thinking of growing food. So I experimented with a lot of ways of growing food, inside and out, under plexiglass, in shelters that I built on deck, and all that was a lot of work.
Wow.
It didn't really work. But
So
what
you grew
did work,
your own food aboard the ship as well?
I made those experiments during the years that I was preparing to go. But what I found out was that sprouts work the best by far. Because if you take a jar of sprouts and put water in them and rinse them, in 3 days, you've got delicious living food. It's the most healthy food you can eat. It's alive. It's got roots and fibers and all kinds of vitamins and minerals and green leaves. So sprouts are the best. Now, for going into space, they're thinking beyond that, because they're thinking, well, if we go into space, we need to be able to grow a plant to its maturity so that we can get the seeds, so that we can be self-sustainable. So they're doing a lot of studies on hydroponics and growing food, because ultimately in Mars, they're going to have to be able to grow plants to their fullness to get the seed to grow them again. But that's a lot of work, and it's very slow, and you don't get very much. But if I take a sack of 50 pounds of mung beans, which doesn't cost but $40, that 50 pounds of mung beans will give me huge leafy green salads twice a day for over a year. So I bring along a few more pounds of that, and I know that I've got fresh leafy green salads and food the whole way, and that's great. The other foods that last are like olive oil and pastas and olive paste and tomato paste and so forth. So I had an Italian food company that was one of my sponsors. All of that took a lot of work.
Wow.
In fact, I got donated pasta and tomato sauce by a big Italian food company. And they said, when are you going? And I really thought, I'm going next year, and I'm going to be going with 6 people, and they delivered me the food. Then I had all this pile of food on the boat. And I had friends helping me. So we were eating the food, and I found out after a while.
Did you wind up eating it or donating it, or?
No, I wound up eating it eventually, but what I realized is that pasta lasts for 5 years and it's still good. So by the time I left, I knew the rice was going to last. I knew the pasta was going to last. I knew the raisins were going to last. I knew the oats were going to last because I'd been doing all those tests.
Sure.
When I set my goal and I said, these are the things I need. I'm going to try to get sponsorship. I'm going to try to get sales. I'm going to try to get equipment. I'm going to try to get food. And food turned out to be the easiest thing for me to get donated. So I started getting food donated to me 15 years before I left. Some of those companies stuck with me all the way. I knew I loved cheese and wanted a good cheese. So what's the best cheese in the world, and how long does it last? How long does it need to be aged? So I said, I need Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. So I went to the fancy food fair and I told them my story. They were my sponsor for 15 years. I ate the very best Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. So it turned out that I ate incredibly great food, and
you were well fed.
Yeah, and had some good breaks in getting food donated to me. And I had experience because it took me so long to go that I knew that rice, brown rice, pasta, all that stuff was going to last 4, 5, 6 years.
Did you fish? Did you eat a lot of seafood, or was that?
As soon as I caught my first fish, I ate a bit of fish every day, because the only fish you can catch out in the wide open ocean are really tuna and mahi-mahi.
Yeah,
so when I catch a tuna or mahi-mahi, it's so big I can't eat it all. So I slice it and dry it and salt it in the sun, and it lasts for months, dried tuna. So I brought bags of rock salt with me because I knew I was going to be salting fish the whole way. So I ate fish the whole voyage, but I didn't count on that for my diet. And I also never took any pills or supplements. I felt that I was getting good food by eating the fish, and by eating the living sprouts, and by eating all my dried food, and by eating my kind of natural organic food that I was eating. It might not be possible for them to do that on a space voyage. So I don't envy them for that, because I don't like to eat packaged food or processed food. I like to eat natural foods. So they're going to have to adapt their bodies to eating space food, which I'd like to know more about. In fact, I would be looking for a space food company that wanted to participate with us so that I could start including that in the voyages. But it would have to be real good for me to eat it, because sailing the boat is a lot of work for me, and I need to be strong and I need to be healthy. And so I need to eat real good food. So I know that it's very scientific, the space food that they have and all of that. And they say it tastes okay, but I don't know of anyone who wants to only eat space food.
What was the tipping point, Reid, where all of this shifted from your extreme voyage to, hey, we should turn this into a structured analog program for Mars-based missions? I want to jump into Mars analog a little bit. When did you realize that this environment could be used as an analog for off-world missions?
I realized that very early on when I was sailing, because I said, I'm like a spaceman out here. Because when I go out to sea, all I see is the stars above me. And at night, the stars are reflecting in the water, or it's phosphorescence. And I always thought I was a spaceman. I said, I'm like a spaceman venturing out into the universe. I'm leaving the Earth behind, and I'm like a spaceman. So I was already living that life. And it was giving me insight and courage before I realized, and I realized this after the Antarctic voyage, because that was in the mid 80s, about 1987, when President Bush said, we're going to go to Mars, and it's going to take 3 years, and it's going to be 6 to 8 people, multinational men and women. And I said, wait a minute, that's what I'm already doing. So I started reading about it, and I said, I'm already the spaceman voyaging. I'm already the captain of my own starship. I'm already dreaming I'm a spaceman. I'm already taking multinational people, men and women, together on the boat and helping them get along together. And I'm already living in an isolated, dangerous, high-performance environment for an extended period of time. There's nothing like what I'm doing. And when I saw how I put my crew together to go to Antarctica, I was already talking with them about these things. And I was already saying, we can die doing what we're doing. There's been no one going ahead of us to do this sort of thing. We don't even have a radio that will call long distance for help. So you could die by coming with me. And they said, but I've always wanted to go to Antarctica so bad. And I said, yeah, and I want to know that you're going to act right next to me if it looks like we're going to die. I want to know you're not going to break down. I want to know you're going to keep working with me to keep ourselves alive. And I go into this life and death thing with them. And I made sure they were all ready for that and all solid. You have to do that in our environment. Now, a land-based Mars analog, you can't do that. It's not serious. You know that you're sitting in the desert in Utah, or you're sitting on a volcano top in Hawaii, and whenever they had a little fuss, the guys didn't like the girls. The girls were too bossy, and the guys said, we don't like this anymore, and they walked out. So, but you see, when you go on a boat, you can't do that. When you go into a life and death situation on Antarctica, I said, look, you're not going to be rescued. You can't be called for rescue. We're going to have to keep ourselves alive on this trip. And when you come, you're committed, and it's life and death. And that way I got real people, and real people who said, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to be beside you. And so that was how I developed real people and real tough people. It wasn't an easy thing to imagine doing. And that's what I wanted, because I didn't really want to do a Caribbean sail with any old person who wanted to come and have their own fun in their own way. I wanted to do something really deep, and really something that would open up what humanity has the capability to do. And the Antarctic voyage started me for that. So in 1986, 87, when the NASA scientists realized they could build a spaceship that could go to Mars. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't NASA scientists. It was a group of scientists, because they had the Mars Underground. Do you know what the Mars Underground is?
I'm not aware, no.
Yeah. Well, back in that time in the 80s, they had assignments from NASA. They were working on projects. They weren't allowed to work on Mars, but they were interested in Mars. And they met people from Lockheed who were interested in Mars. And they met people from the different space companies. So they had to go underground and plan together. And that's how the Mars Underground developed. And that was people who said, we can go to Mars now. But their companies weren't giving them permission to work on it. So they went underground. And I met, in particular, one of those people, and I met some of those people. And I had my first press about seafarers of today provide a role model for spacefarers of tomorrow. 1989, I had already formed my psychological, and I don't want to use psychological because I'm not a psychologist. I'm more of a visionary thinker, and I'm more of a natural-born mystic, which means that I have access to places above the intellectual mind that are not understandable by the intellectual mind, and it's harder to teach that sort of thing or categorize it or believe in it. So by the mid-'80s, I had formed my own long-duration space psychology. But, long-duration space psychology didn't exist before then. They had space psychology. How are we going to keep these people happy while they go to the moon? How are we going to keep these people happy while they do short trips and functioning? Because in our experience, the Navy guys break down after this many days. The submarine guys break down after this many days. We can't keep them out there. So long duration psychology came about. And when long duration psychology came about, there were a few psychologists who were into space psychology who started developing their thoughts for what's it going to take when we're out there for longer, for years at a time, and so forth. So a lot of what they based their knowledge and opinions upon was studying the explorers that went before that. And that would be studying the explorers who got stuck in the ice. Those were the best examples of how does a group of men live together when they're stuck in a dangerous, isolated environment for an extended period of time. They're stuck for the year there. How did they survive? What happened? These people went crazy. These people survived. But back in those days, that was a staunch bunch of men. And that's a good word to describe them. And the best example of that is the story of the Fram. And that the Fram was Nansen, who was the first guy to build a boat. He said, this boat won't sink in the ice because I'm going to shape it like this. So when the ice squeezes it, it's going to keep popping up. So he was the first guy to get that idea and the first guy to build a boat like that. And he attempted to go to the North Pole, and he took his ice boat up into the ice, and they got stuck. They knew they would. And so the boat was built to go up on the ice and not get stuck. And then he went and launched his effort to make it to the pole, and he didn't, and he got out. And the story of that is too great, and how he did it is too great and too deep. And I might get into that if we have time. But what happened with his crew that he left behind was they didn't get out of the ice. They were stuck in the ice for almost 3 years before they got the boat out. So that's the best example of a group of men who were isolated in a dangerous high-performance environment where they could die at any moment, where they had to get along together, where they were isolated from their friends and family and everyone, and no way to talk to anyone back in those days. That's the best example that the modern day long duration psychologists could glean knowledge about human mind and how were they going to survive. So they looked at what happened before. And so that was the beginning of long duration space psychology. And I want to say right here and now, I was there in the beginning. And I first gave my first talk in 1990 at the Mars conference, where I delivered the paper, Seafarers of Today Provide a Role Model for Spacefarers of Tomorrow. And I talked about a lot of the same stuff I'm talking to you about right now. And that was when I published my second article, but that one was in Ad Astra, National Space Magazine. And that puts me in the beginning of long duration space psychology. So I'm one of the originators of it, but I had it by experience. Now, another thing I want to point out, that was back in the mid 80s. The guys that were into long duration psychology in the beginning, when it began and helped form it, they were already old. They're dead and gone now. I'm the only one left from the beginning.
Did you work with NASA? Did you work with anyone?
No, I met
them. Did they ever come to you after these missions and say, Reid, like, teach us the mentality?
Listen, I was there. And when you're at a conference, there's two things. I'm gonna mention the first thing I noticed first. So I'm at a conference, there's space workers, enthusiasts there in every field. And they're speaking about every aspect of what it's going to take to Mars. So, of course, there's the rocket geniuses, the fuel geniuses, the people who are working in the technology and all of that. And I said, well, where are the people that are dealing with the human issues if we're going to send to Mars? And out of 100 speakers, there was only like 2, me and one other guy, or 2 guys. And I said to them, I said, well, they said, well, how are you financing it? And I said, I'm not financing it. I'm just spending everything I have trying to make my mission go forward. And yeah, I'm promoting what I'm doing. I want everyone to know what I've done and what I'm doing because I'm going to contribute to the knowledge of human behavior relevant for humanity evolving off of the Earth and going to Mars. And I found out that everyone was paid by their company to go to this conference, except for the behavioral psychologists. They had to come on their own dime. So even back then, I knew they didn't care about the psychological side. They didn't take the soft science seriously. The real serious part was, are we going to go Mars direct, or are we going to go to the moon first? And how are we going to do this and do that? They
Why
didn't
do you
care about the
think
psychology.
that is? Why ignore the psychological
They're
side?
still doing it, I think.
Th-
And that's,
I agree, and
yeah.
that makes me wonder: is any of it real?
Well,
What like why ignore that aspect
well,
if
it's incredible. I think because the other parts of it, the technology and the material science, is highly money driven. It's a huge profit business. So those guys are doing something that's real important for guys above them to make a ton of money. And there's not really money in the behavioral study of the human mind and what it takes. It's hard to turn into money, but there's big, huge money in how does a satellite develop. And so that was why there was more people into that, and why they were financed by their companies to go to the meeting, and why the meetings were about that. Now, the other part of the question I'm going to say is, yeah, there were NASA people there, and there were NASA officials who were there, and they all gave their talks. Everyone goes around with badges at those conferences, you know? So
Sure.
when you see them talk, you see them later in the halls or between the meetings, and especially in the evenings are usually social hour. So everyone will be hanging out at the bar or around. So
Absolutely.
I targeted certain people I was trying to get to. And I went to two NASA officials and I said, well, hi, I'm Reid. I'm doing this. And they said, yeah, we heard about you. People are talking about you. It's real interesting. We talked a little more. And one of them said, but now listen, Reid, NASA will never work with you. NASA only works with people who we know will do exactly what we tell them to do. And you're not that kind of person. So they gave it to me like that right away, right up front. But I want to add something to that, because, on the space station, they already had an altercation where the guys on the space station said, hey, you guys down there in mission control, we're tired of you guys talking to us. But they'd only been up there for a little while and they weren't far away. They said, we just want to cut off communications for you a little while. We know what we're doing. We don't need you meddling all the time. So already their NASA scientists have done what they didn't want them to do.
Right.
So, on a Mars trip, when someone's gone for years, they aren't going to want to be bossed around by the guys in mission control. They're going to cut off communication because they're going to say, look, we know what we're dealing with here and we want to focus on it. We don't want to try to explain to them everything and be told by them everything that we have to do. So you're going to end out with people that are going to do what they want to do, whether NASA likes it or not. Anyway,
so they gave you the cold shoulder.
They gave me a real good cold shoulders over and over again. Oh, but and I have a thing, and we can get into this subject a little more. I always said, and you've heard me mention a bit about this, I always said that I'm going to succeed by the power of love, because the power of love is really the most important thing for humans in so many ways, because I love my tools and because I love my work and because I love the sea more than anyone, because I'm going to go live on it without stopping more than anyone ever has. I love it so much, and I'm going to love who I'm with the best I can, and I'm going to love the sea the best I can. And that's a lot what drives my psychology, to gain power and to adapt. So I went to several conferences. There were other space psychologists talking about things. And I told some other NASA guys, I said, in all of the talk about what humans are going to deal with mentally going into space and how we're going to prepare for it, I never heard one of those guys say one thing about love. And they said, oh, no. We can't mention that word. We can't use that word. We use the word tolerance. So they told me that. And I thought to myself, well, my God, there's a major world of difference between tolerance and love.
Absolutely.
There's just a huge...
Tolerance is not love
So
by any means.
I think I've been up against a different mindset as I try to introduce my mindset that I had power on and believed in, and I had already proven myself with my Antarctic expedition. And so I had my belief that this is a good way to be if you're going to be isolated for years in a time and ready to die. So, like, I'm a little bit of an expert on world traditions of dying. You know that most of the countries around the world and primitives and natives have a tradition of dying, and they guide their people into death. And they guide them for a period of time after death. It's a tradition in every culture. So that's something I'm a bit of an expert in. Why? Because I have to know about the art of dying. Because if I'm going to live for 3 years on my boat at sea, I know I can die. So how do
Right.
I reconcile that? And how do I live with that and go forward? So if you go to Mars, you're on a Mars spaceship, you have to know that you really could die. And they will die, some of them. You have to know
Do
you
you
can die.
think they looked at you in a negative light because of this other side of you, this artistic side,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
spiritual side? Do you think they just said, "Oh, this guy's crazy. He's a
Yeah.
he's a
Yeah.
kook," right?
Yeah.
Did you feel that way, that they came at you kind of like that?
Very much so, from the officials and from the space psychologists themselves, because
Yeah.
they are a different type of person than I am. They went to school, they studied, they love psychology, they wanted to study these things. They're serious and they're brilliant and they're scholars, but they're also have to act a certain way to keep their jobs and to
Of
get
course.
tenured and to get their retirement. That's really important in their mind. They've got to get their retirement because they're working. So they can't think about living without getting their retirement. So their head is in a different place. And they've also never been in a life and death situation with a group of people for any period of time because they're scholars. So they see it differently. So they see
Yeah.
differently than I do. So there hasn't always been a meeting of the minds. I've had a meeting of the minds with some of them, but definitely most of them, no, not at all. Because and we will have a continued not meeting of the minds because I've said some of the stuff I've said publicly and it's been in the press and so forth. And I'm saying that you have to have a different mindset than thinking that it's bad to go up there and developing coping mechanisms to be able to handle it.
Right.
And so you have to be,
Even thinking about relationships, if you're going up with a group of men and women and having relationships form, particularly on a long distance voyage as well. I don't hear anything about that publicly, but I'm sure that type of psychological thinking and mentality has to come up in plannings for these NASA astronauts, these missions, right?
it's happened over and over again. I described the people that had to walk out of the habitat in Hawaii, but in Russia, some Americans went into a habitat with some Russians, and while they were isolated, one of the Russian guys wanted to kiss one of the American lady astronauts, and it caused a huge, a huge
Issue.
issue that
Yeah.
was much larger than life and larger than it is. And how do you deal with something like that? It's so you don't know how to deal with something like that, except they blew it way out of proportion. But but they've already had issues in short things. And I can tell you about more things that I have issues with that they're doing, and I'm scratching my head thinking, how in the world can NASA do that? What are they thinking? You know, so I have my experience in life and what I've done, which I had already before I did the longest nonstop sea voyage in history. And after doing it, I have some very solid beliefs that if the people who go don't get some good things into their mind and they're being, oh gosh, I worry about them so much. And that's one of the reasons why I'm pushing forward so hard, because I've almost given up a few times. And then I thought to myself, my God, if I don't help them out, they're going to have troubles. That's one of the reasons why I'm still so powerfully thrusting into the unique contribution that I can make in a long duration space psychology. Because I don't talk about the other stuff. I mean, there's experts in all that other stuff. I don't talk about that at all. I try to stick specifically to what I know, which is having lived over 3 years not seeing the Earth. People are going to have to gain some insights from that experience that I had, or they're going to have a lot of problems. I can help.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about there. How are you, I want to go back to like the birth of Mars analog missions because I want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell us a little bit more about this venture that you're building. But how do you build in psychology into these missions? What makes someone a good fit? And what types of kind of interpersonal friction show up at sea that maybe you don't anticipate?
Well, and I noticed from your notes something that's relevant before I talk about that I came up with the Mars ocean analogs in 2020. And I did that because, and I had backed away a little bit because I had gotten nothing but lots of rejections on all of it in every way. It's something that people don't understand very well. And in fact, I was mocked for the largest part of many, many years for my beliefs in this and for saying this. Oh, they'd write about me, read the spaceman, and make a joke about me for talking about it, you know? And so I backed off a little bit and carried on with my life. And then a Musk took off. And when he started building rockets, he said, and he said, we're gonna send people to Mars in 3 years. And I saw what he was doing and knew that he was amazing. And I said, wait a minute, who are they going to send? Because I spent 20 years preparing to do the 1,000-day voyage. And if they're going to send people to Mars, they're only going to have 3 years to train. Who are those people? I started trying to find out who they were and what they were doing, and nothing was happening. And I said, oh my God, I need to step up and get involved in this. And that was why I got involved with it and created the program, because I thought I had something that the world needed. It was really important. The human link is being a lot left out of the whole thrust for humanity to evolve off of the Earth, because I'm not hearing and I'm not reading the kind of things that make me think those guys have any comprehension of how did I live for over 3 years just between the stars without seeing land, knowing I could die. How did I live and keep my body and mind healthy so that when I stepped off the boat, I was more powerful than I was when I started? When people come back from Mars, we want them to be that way.
Right.
So,
Well, look at astronauts now. When we just had that emergency rescue from the ISS, right? When those astronauts are coming back, and this is obviously a factor of microgravity, right? But their bodies are unable to operate as they would originally, right? Even if they are exercising. So despite there being gravity on these analog missions that you're running, there is a physical element of upkeep to the body that needs to be had on that voyage as well.
yeah, for the Mars trip, well, like I said, I'm not an authority on the life sciences of that, but we know that they're not prepared even now for the microgravity. They've got to put some kind of artificial gravity into it. And we also know that they don't have proper radiation shielding. So right now, the idea of going to Mars is not something that people will survive doing. So they've got to develop those sciences better before that. That's not what I can promote or talk about with any authority, because I'm not a scientist. I only speak about my experience, what I did, how I did it, and why it worked and why it's relevant.
I want to learn more about Mars ocean analogs and some of these early missions. So you said 2020, that's when things kind of kicked off. Let's talk about the first expedition and kind of the planning that went into that and who was involved.
During the years before that, I was taking care of my old dad who had Alzheimer's. for the last 8 years of his life. And so I was living in his home, taking care of him. And I'm a painter. I was mostly painting. I'm a writer. I was writing all my books. I have all of these books that I have yet to publish, though I've tried. That's another story. So I was busy there during that time. And then I heard Must Say we're going in 3 years, and I got all excited, and I said, I got to get in on that. They need my help because there's no one who knows, and that was when I got ready to set off. So one of the things that made the success of all my voyages that I've done, especially the Antarctic voyage, was the people who wanted to go with me helped me get ready to go. That means that they invested their time and energy and thought into building the crew with me and getting the hard work done on the boat to prepare it to go. And that worked very successfully for me for the better part of my life. So the first mission that I did was actually with 4 captains who were sailors who wanted sea time with me. And I enlightened them to the whole Mars thing, and they got into it. They liked that. I said, look, we're going to wear uniforms. They wear uniforms when they do analog missions. So the badge says Mars Ocean Analogs. You get into that state of mind with the uniform. So I had this group of 4 guys. They got into it. They were just great. So when I started to form the idea, I communicated with Robert Zubrin. Robert Zubrin is the leader of the Mars Society. Robert Zubrin has to be the leading vocalist promoter of We Can Go to Mars. He's the one who really started it. He was the leader of the Mars Underground. And he claims to be the one who influenced Elon to go and get into rocketry and go to Mars. So I was in touch with him because I had met him in 1990 at the first Mars conference. And I told him about what I wanted to do. And he said, that's a really great idea, but did Chris McKay approve of what I was doing? Chris McKay was the original NASA scientist who got the idea that with his scientific work in Antarctica, living in that dangerous isolation environment, that he was learning things that were relevant to someone going to Mars. So he was, like, as far as I know, really the first person who brought up the idea of doing analogs. And his Antarctic work was the dangerous high-performance environment where they were isolated and could die. And so he could say, we're learning about things for going to Mars. So he was a NASA guy who started that. So, and then I met him back in those days too, and talked to him about what I was doing, and I got his approval. He said, go for it. It's good. It's worthwhile. You should do it. So it wasn't official NASA approval. It was someone in NASA who knew me and liked me. They couldn't get official approval for me. Well, one of the main reasons why they couldn't is because going to sea is too dangerous. I mean, it's too difficult. Every year, the biggest, most expensive boats are lost at sea, and people are lost at sea. So inherently, if NASA started real training on smaller boats at sea, if there was a disaster, the public could raise an outcry and it could hurt their program. So they only do things that are safe.
So it was a PR issue, right? How can we send people to space if we're afraid to send them out to sea?
I always said that, and I always ended my speeches with, if you don't think, because people didn't think I could live 1,000 days nonstop at sea. So when I got back to New York, I went to the Explorers Club and I said, hey, this is what I did. This is what I'm getting ready to do. And there was, a lot of enthusiastic people. But when it came down to the meetings, I was told that Bob Ballard, do you know who he is? Bob Ballard he's the Navy guy who discovered the Titanic. And he made his fame from discovering the Titanic. And using new technology, he discovered the Titanic. He was there at the Explorers Club, and they told me that he vetoed the Explorers Club from helping me because he said, it's impossible. The guy's crazy. No one can live 3 years at sea without resupply. So he blocked me. So I didn't get help from them. So I've had people block me every step of the way, let me tell you, and I can talk more about the psychology of that. But I mean, literally blocked me because he thought I was crazy, because no one can do that. But I ended my speeches.
Or did you think that they were trying to suppress you and suppress what you were trying to do because they knew maybe that you could be successful with this, and they knew that you were on to something
No,
that
I
could
don't think
change now?
I don't think so. I think it was more they were worried about their reputation. If they
Okay.
endorsed this, I could appear to everyone else as crazy, and the Explorers Club didn't want to be associated with someone who was crazy. And then if I failed, it would be bad for their reputation. So I was up against that sort of thing all the time. That that was so I had to just go forward with doing what I was doing.
Now that the commercial space industry is taking the baton from NASA, so to speak, do you think that there will be more risk takers like Elon Musk, or do you think that because these companies are going to have shareholders and they're going to have people who are invested in the success of the company, that they're still going to be less likely to take those risks?
Yeah, I have stories about all this because I've been pushing my project all along, and so I guess it was maybe a little over a year ago or something like that. My partner Maxine Hoover and I, she works with me very close on this expedition in every sort of way. We went to the Explorers Club to greet the astronaut that took the first uh, um, space tourists up to space. So when I went in, I targeted him in the pre-room gathering and went to talk to him. He was talking to a space billionaire. And I introduced myself right away. I said, "This is what I'm doing. I'm into long duration space psychology after having done the longest nonstop sea voyage in history. So I want to meet anyone in the space industry who's interested in this real hardcore long duration space psychology." So, but he went up and spoke. And when he started speaking, he said, "I met a gentleman who's into long duration space psychology. You know, we're not into that. We're workers. We have our families. We go up and we work for a little while and we come back." And I went, "Oh my God, I can't believe he just said that. Does that mean the men that are leading the way into space aren't turning their head away from Earth and looking out towards Mars and the stars and saying, what will it take for us to do this? No, they're not into it. So they're not thinking about it." And that was something that really affected me. But then later I had a chance to talk to the space billionaire again, because I had gone to the Mars conference and I had given a speech. It's on my website. My speech was that I'm the most qualified person to command the first ship to Mars that's taking humans, because I've been driving a starship all my life into the unknown. And I'm in the very beginning of space psychology. There's no one else who can say that. I know what it's like, and I can be the captain that leads it. Of course, there's going to be astronauts who know the technical stuff that I can't do, but I can do a lot of things, and I'm the ultimate MacGyver, I can tell you that. But there will be astronauts who know all the skills, but they need a man to lead them who's actually done it and who's dealt with people and so forth. And he said, "Oh, no, no, the space billionaires are going to buy the first seats to Mars." So I don't know if you've heard that either, but I figure, well, even if they do,
Good.
they
We'll get rid of them first.
they'll want to talk to me and have me consult with them because I've done it, you know. So I've had all kind of experiences promoting what I'm doing, and
But just because you could buy your ticket to space still doesn't mean that you're actually qualified mentally, physically, operationally. You're still going to need a crew or support, right? Whether that's a human crew, whether that's an artificial intelligent crew in the future, right? If we look at some films and movies, right? There's a lot more to it than just buying your way to space.
well, that was what he said. Who knows how it's going to be? But if you help finance the Mars mission, you might be able to get a seat. So who knows how it's going to work out?
Yeah. What about, so you had this first mission, you had 4 individuals. How did Mars Ocean Analog evolve after that?
Well, I could get back because the Mars Society did send us their guy who does their Mars habitats. So he helps with all the Mars habitats. And he came with us, and we liked that a lot because it made it more official for us to have a real space person on board who does analogs and all of that on it. And so part of doing an analog mission is, you put the uniform on. When you put the uniform on, you take that role to a certain degree, and then you play that part. So when people make their logs from the Mars analogs, they actually are writing their logs saying, oh, now we've been on Mars for a week, and they really put themselves in the state of mind of that they're doing a Mars trip. And that's what we did too. So in all the days that we worked together, which was real important because it bonded the crew very tightly. My crew got to see that everyone was capable. Everyone was working hard. Everyone was dedicated to do this Mars analog. So that was what made it such a success, and it was along the lines of what I had been doing in the past with my Antarctic expedition and so forth. If I can just have the people together as a group and they actually help me get ready to go, it's always the best, and it always works the best. If I just let people jump on board the boat, I don't really know what they're like. They don't know what I'm like, and they haven't bonded with the crew. So you've got that mix that finds its way into most of the missions that I've done, because I haven't been able to get all analog astronauts to come with me for various reasons, and for my longest sea voyage in history. And if you look it up and look at the press, you'll see that I started the voyage with a woman, and she was a wonderful woman. And she blew my mind how good she was and how well she did the mission. I was lucky to have her, because for the 20 years that I was trying to get my mission to go, I always said to the guy I met, do you want to come with me, man? And I couldn't find anyone that wanted to go. Just like when I wanted to go to Antarctica, I couldn't find anyone anywhere in the world who wanted to go with me. I had to go to New Zealand to get people. And I couldn't get anyone, even with all the press I was getting and records I was breaking. I couldn't get anyone who wanted to go for 1,000 days with me, except that lady who did an excellent job. After the voyage, when she met me on land, I'll get back to it, but I want to talk about this point. The press said to her, you were just a New York City girl. You just graduated from college, and you'd never done any real exploration. How in the world did you prepare yourself to go to sea for 1,000 days? And they wanted to catch her, And she answered them back very discreetly, I didn't prepare for 1,000 days. And I saw the looks on their face change. She said, I prepared for an eternity. And their expressions all changed completely, because they saw that she got them. They saw that she was wise. They saw that she did what she had to do. And that's what she did. And that's why she was able, without experience, to adapt and be an excellent partner to go with me. All except these are things that happen with men and women. And in spite of our precautions, she got pregnant at sea. But before we left, she said, what if I have to get off? And I said, yeah, I'm taking you with me. But if you have to get off, I'm going to have you rescued at sea, because I'm going to finish my mission. I've been working on it for 20 years. I have hundreds of people who have helped me, and a lot of people have put money into it. Companies have sponsored me. I can't stop the trip. When I set off, it's do or die for me. If you have to get off, I'm going to have to let you off. So we went in that state of mind. So then when she got pregnant, I'm going, I don't believe it. You're nervous because we're here in the Indian Ocean where there's storms everywhere. And she said, no, I really think I'm pregnant. So we arranged to have her rescued at sea off of Australia. So she was rescued at sea. And from that moment, she did 307 days, which was the longest continuous sea voyage for any woman. And when she was rescued off the boat, I sat there at my wheel, and I knew I wasn't going to see another human for the next 2 years. And I set my course across the Southern Ocean under Australia. And then I was alone. I didn't see another human for 846 days. It so happens, and she knew it very well, they said, well, now that we've done all this sailing, you're really not going to be able to do the 1,000-day voyage. No one's helping you. No one's giving you money. Let's sell the boat and have a farm and live on the land. And so I couldn't do that. So when she wanted me to sell the boat, give up the Mars dreams, and I said, well, I don't know how to live on the land. I can't sell the boat I built. I'm in a place in history where we have this great program. We have to go forward. And that caused us to drift apart. So that's how we drifted apart. All of this is relevant for Mars. What's going to happen? People are going to go to Mars and things are going to happen. And when humans settle up there, things are going to happen. So we have to talk about these issues and what's going to happen with it.
I want to circle back a bit to the Mars ocean analogs. Now, they are how long typically? Are they a week long, 2 weeks long?
2 to 3 weeks. When Zubrin was talking with me about it, he said, oh, you should take them to sea for a month. And I said, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if people can do a month at sea. I got to start with something much shorter than that to find out what they can do. And that's the truth of it. It's very difficult for people who haven't been sailing to spend time at sea, especially in a Mars state of mind. So we designed our program so that it's around 2 to 3 weeks of time at sea and for them to adapt to that. And I always said, it's hard to get real science and data out of all of this. And we will develop that and we will do more of that. There's things you can wear. We've done some forms, filling out questionnaires, and we've done some experiments with different analog groups and all of that. But for me, the bottom line of the importance of what we're doing is if an astronaut's going to go to Mars, if they can't be a good crew member on a boat for only 2 to 3 weeks, then how do you expect them to be a good crew member on a trip to Mars that lasts over? And let's say that even if they trained a group of astronauts, how long are they going to train the group that's going to go to Mars together? Is that group going to be together for 6 months? Are they going to be isolated from the rest of the world? Are they going to be in life and death situations where they find out what they're made of? How well are they going to train the people that go? But let's say they put together 6 people that were excellent people and got along really well together. If you put them on a boat out at sea for even a short period of time, I will guarantee that when they get back, there will be someone on that trip who they want to kick off. There will be some people saying, no, I don't want to go to Mars with this person. Because that person, they found out what that person was like when they were cramped in a dangerous high-performance environment for a period of time. That person acted differently than they acted in the big swimming pool at NASA when they had to go underwater. And
how have people reacted on these voyages?
When we've planned trips with groups of analog astronauts who have had experience doing analogs in other environments, they're all people who are interested in space. Almost all of them really want to go to Mars. They're becoming astrobiologists, astrophysicists. They're trying to build their resume to be a valuable person to go to Mars. So on their resume, it's that I have these physics skills or I have these astrobiology skills, so I'm going to be a needed crew member. I've been in the space community this many years. I did this analog in Hawaii. I did this analog in Utah. I did this training here, and I did the Mars ocean analogs. So they built their resume to be a more valuable person to go to Mars. That's a lot the goals that I see they have. And so in the mix of that, I've had all kinds of people participating in various ways, showing what they were made of and facing what they hadn't faced before. Someone who's on land can become a very different person on the sea. Let me tell you that. Someone who you meet on the land and talk to and brainstorm with and talk about everything with can be a completely different person when they go to sea. Because when people get on the sea, something happens to them. First of all, there's seasickness. So whoever can deal with seasickness in one way or the other, I mean, almost half of the people have to deal with seasickness like they've never had before, you know? So you're dealing with a physical thing that I can't do a lot about that. But people change when they're on the land as compared to when they come on the sea. And so as for preparation for the voyage, I talk with them, communicate with them, and I give them my manual called the Mars Adaptive Mind. And the Mars Adaptive Mind is the little book that I wrote about how did I actually do the 1,000-day voyage from a mental, spiritual point of view. I don't talk about how I did it from a seamanship and technical and physical point of view. I talk about how did I prepare my mind to do what I did. And so I give that to everyone to read.
Do you notice, have you noticed any patterns in those who are successful during these voyages versus those who are struggling to, you know, participate?
Yes, they do very well. Some people do very well. Some people don't do too well, but as the mission ends, they muster up and they love it. And they talk about what they learned and they promote it. So it's all kinds of things. And certainly I have people who I love and who I think are the greatest and who tell me they love me when they get off the trip. And there's people who get off and tell me they hate me. Same thing. I'll tell you, it's really like that. So you get the extremes when you take someone and put them in an environment they've never been in before, where they're with a crew and where they have to participate, where they have to be present, and as when we're enabled and we have the ability, and when people think it's more important and it's something that they really have to do, that they come on a Mars analog, we'll be able to make the vetting process better, and we'll be able to make the pre-training process better. And the whole works. They should take a sailing course wherever they are to get the basics.
Do you teach a lot of that at sea? Do you teach
Yes.
the
Oh, yeah.
sailing aspects?
Everyone joins in. I teach it all the time to everyone. That was why the 4 captains wanted to go with me. They wanted sea time. I had the best, they were the best crew. They had the best spirits. We had the best bonding. They worked the hardest. No problem was too great. We all did great together. And everyone, it was such good people that I could hardly believe it. And out of them all, we all still love each other. And all 4 of those captains ended up getting their own ocean going boat and doing ocean cruising. So they needed that process with me. They wanted it. And they gave themselves to the mission. They worked on the boat. They put on the uniform. They spoke to the press. They spoke at meetings. I'm an analog astronaut. This is why it's important for people to learn these things going to Mars on a ship and all of that. So then I have great people that go. And also I was wanting to turn those captains into Mars captains, meaning as I want to see my program going, I won't be able to be the one who's the captain every time. And if we expand our program and we have a Mars ocean analog program in Europe, or say Dubai is a perfect place for it. Any country that's trying to build their space program and wants a space program present that's teaching these things and making their public aware of it, we would see that it would be in different places in the world. So I would want to train captains that are capable. They're capable to sail. They're good people. They're a good commander. They can deal with people and command people. But to be a Mars captain, you have to keep the subject on Mars and what we're doing, what we're trying to learn. What is it? Because one of my first rules, and the first rule in my book, is when you come on the boat, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. I don't care how you've excelled in other fields, because now we're in the present moment, and I just want you to be present. And I cannot sit down at the dinner table and have someone start talking about movies or space trivia or trivia or politics. because we're on a Mars mission.
Yeah.
So you have to put your mind in that state. So the first thing is concentration and adaptability. That's what you have to do if you come on the boat. You have to come on the boat and say, I want to make the most use of this. I've got the guy teaching me who did the longest sea voyage in history, so I'm going to try to do the best I can. I'm going to come on and I'm going to leave my life and the things I talk about on land, on the shore, and I'm going to focus on what I can do to be the best crew member and contribute to this trip and to the Mars thing. So what are we going to learn when we're on this trip that's relevant for going to Mars that will help me and that we can help share to the rest of the world? That's the
To
first
that
thing.
point, what type of skills do you walk away with?
Well, you walk away with all the physical skills because you know what? More than half of them couldn't even cook. And I'm going, you don't know how to cook? Well, I mean, maybe you don't have to cook on a space trip. Maybe you just throw it in a microwave or there's an oven that makes chocolate chip cookies. But some people don't know how to cook. So they've only been served in their life or bought the food. So then if we're trying to do everyone share and participate kind of thing, then you've got someone who doesn't know how to do dishes or cook. So then how do you deal with that? So really a lot of what we're doing is trying to teach them to be real people and to
Yeah,
participate
the
as a crew.
basics.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
basics. And
Almost primitive, right? Is it more
yes,
primitive skills
yes,
than yeah.
yeah, basic stuff. Are you going to step up when something has to be done? So every time something needs to be done, there will be those who excel and are paying attention and see what it is and step up, and they're next to me or they're bringing things to my point. And then there'll be others who don't have a clue and never have a clue and never pay attention and don't cook and weasel their way out of that somehow and don't know how to do the dishes and weasel their way out of that somehow. So then I'm saying, how do you bond a crew and imagine that you're going to complete the mission well as I designed it to be? I'll tell you what, you know, always the thing about how they say the captain is rules on a ship, you know, there's people who have really almost never taken commands in their lives. There are ladies who don't want men to tell them what to do. So these are things that I've dealt with.
Yeah,
These are big
being
issues.
able to take
So
commands.
with a command without asking a question and saying, do I have to do that or why are we doing that? And that sort of thing. Instead of immediately jumping on it, instead of trusting me completely, instead of thinking there's something wrong with me when I've done what I've done, you know, I'm going to be doing my best to keep you alive and keep you from getting hurt and take good care of you. So people are not used to being on a boat under command of a captain because they haven't had that experience in their life. They've lived their whole life without taking commands, you know? So there's a
Did
lot
you
of
have anyone like did you have anyone from the military who participated, who may be more used to that type of lifestyle?
uh, yes, but then again, that particular person had so many issues, they were one of the worst crew members ever. So they don't necessarily, hands down, follow the rules like they did in the military. And even when you think they're that kind of person, they're not. And that experience traumatized them. So they come aboard with trauma from being in the military. So that's a
Yeah.
real tricky issue. And I'll just change the subject slightly at this point. I love your logo. Your logo is
Well,
great.
thank you. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
So your logo tells me something. It tells me that you see space as a beautiful opportunity and that somehow people are going to be guided into the space by a wise person
Absolutely.
at the door helping them through. And I see that is so important. And that is a lot what I'm talking about. And my goal through all of this is to help enlightened, good people lead the way to Mars. And it has to be that. And that probably won't be the military bringing that kind of person to the doorway up there to meet the wise man who's going to help him on. And so that means that the person who goes is going to have some experience with. I would want to know what's that person's experience as being a good, wise person who's coming with me to Mars. Has that person done good things for the world? Has that person spoken of good things to the world? Has that person have a following that says this person is wise and has been a good person for me to be with? So
are they easily manipulated, right? You should look for negative things as well.
Right. So, so your logo says a lot to me, and I identify with that, and I see that as a bold statement that you look at that and you also say, maybe art should be on the way to Mars, that kind of thinking. Maybe mythology should be on the way to Mars, because mythology is what helped us dream of Mars. Are we going to block it, or are we going to endorse it and say, if we connect with our mythological self, we're going to be more of a whole person and more capable as we live among the stars? And so that would mean that the people who go, have they read Joseph Campbell? Have they understood how myth has played a role in the advancement of the human mind and the human culture? And have they studied things by wise people and sayings by wise people? So your man at the door there says a lot, and it's a very bold statement. And I identify with that and am supportive of that. And that's one of my main goals. Well, I want the world to see that there is a wise teacher at the door guiding humanity into the space. The whole world has to see that too, because what is the world going to think about the people that go? And the people that go have to be able to, the people that go have a big responsibility to share something good with the world, to make the world.
I think the people who are ready to accept the teachings, accept the knowledge, accept that evolution, I think those leaders will present themselves to them, where they don't necessarily have to always seek them out themselves, but those wizards, so to speak, will show them that path when they're ready to see it.
And we're going to hope that somehow those people are going to be the people leading the way to Mars, so that we have people who are inspiring the world and giving good messages back and acting right in front of the world. So that's why your logo is important. And I didn't change the subject that much, because I was talking about human behavior aboard a starship. And what are you committed to, and what are you guided by? And if you have strict military rules, people who have been living under that sort of thing, they're traumatized in some ways. They're traumatized in a lot of ways, or they think that sort of strictness is what it's going to be. But it might work good for short space trips, but when you have to sit there for years, you're going to have someone who has an expansive mind, who can let their mind expand to something larger than the little space they're in, and whether they're going to die or not. So that's why these things are very important in preparing humanity to evolve off of the Earth. And those are the things that we talk about, and that we deal with on our Mars Ocean Analogs, and that I give people stuff to read about it and understand.
You would say that your expeditions are more psychological training than anything, the mental fortitude combined with the basic skills needed to sail and survive, almost like a wilderness survival expedition in a way, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And I would think that certainly they would have to do that before they went. So the astronaut that led the billionaires up to one of the first billionaire trips to the space station, the billionaires went through some of that training. They decided they were going to do a wilderness survival trip, and they went out somewhere to camp out. And when they got out there, it started raining. And by the second day, they said, send the helicopters for us. This is not fun anymore. So the helicopters came and picked up the billionaires on their wilderness survival tests. So it really is going to take a lot of that sort of thing. And this is, we can talk more about the people that are astronauts that are being prepared to go. They can't imagine what I went through and how many people belittled me and blocked me and tried to stop me from going. And I wasn't admired all the way, like an astronaut's admired their whole life. They should see what it's like to be hazed and abused, and that will build some part of their character that'll make them more stable for the real trip. So there's a lot of things about what we do with our Mars ocean analogs that's cutting edge and new and different and hard for people to cope with, but they're real things, and they're hard to categorize. They don't exist in the other analogs, and they aren't really part of the current trend in training and the state of mind for training and so forth, which is so different than what we're doing.
But there's a lot of overlap that I see too. Like, take something as simple as seasickness. That is very similar to the sickness that astronauts experience in microgravity, right? So you can argue that going out to sea and experiencing seasickness prepares you for the potential sickness that you might experience in space, right? So there's overlaps there with the physical side of things. There's overlaps with the mental fortitude that you need to have to participate in long duration missions, and then the physical aspects, like you're saying, right? I'm sure, I mean, personally, I've never sailed, but when you're moving the sails, right, when you're actually physically sailing the ship, there is some strength that is needed, right, to pull those sails up, to climb, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that piece?
Well, yes. One of the things that I say things and I set up rules, and we haven't been able to be as effective as we want to be. Do you have medical issues? People were not truthful. Later things showed up and the person wasn't truthful with me. So how do I deal with that? I guess we become more official, and we make documents that they sign have to be more exacting, like what kind of meds are you on? What kind of problems have you really had? People don't share these things, and they keep them secret, and then things come up later. And then I say, I want people who, astronauts have certain size conditions. They have to be a certain size and a certain weight. They have to be pretty fit. And some analog astronauts are not fit at all and could hardly even climb up the ladder from the dinghy into the boat. And then I'm going, uh-oh, what's happening here? And others are fat and out of shape. And I'm going, they don't let someone go on a spaceship like that, but this person thinks they want to go to Mars, and now I've got them on my boat. I didn't realize that from looking at their face and talking to them. So we have to have a vetting process that's more rigorous, but in order to pull that off better, we need to have a more rigorous program set up, and all of that's a lot of work and time and money. And the same way, I just do what I can to keep the whole show going. So some people say they want to go and drop out at the last minute, and then I don't have as many people. It's not as good of an analog. Or I take someone who wasn't prepared and didn't psych up for it properly, didn't read my material, because I'm trying to put a group together to do this. So we're trying to start a program, and we can't run the program as we would ideally like to do it, because we're adapting to people to be able to do the program. So,
it's sort of.
Oh, that's why I liked your logo so much. It showed a man of wisdom offering people the opportunity. And that's why we want to do that. And as you and I talk about it now, I can tell you I'm committed, and I'm going to keep trying the whole way to be there and contribute what I learned about living between the stars for over 3 years without seeing land. I'm committed, and I feel like I just have to share that with the whole program, with people, and with the whole world to be able for people to realize this sort of thing.
What is holding the program back? Is it awareness? Is it funding? Is it the partnerships or backing by organizations that can make it more legitimized?
I think that it's maybe inertia in the bureaucracy where I think people, it makes sense to people. But to make it work within their field of work, there's a bureaucracy that they have to go through to make it work. And a lot of people are hands full doing what they're doing, and the inertia is holding it back a lot. And with people not knowing what to do about helping the program, even when they want to help the program. So I think that's part of it. And also, you're familiar with the things that I'm talking with you about now, but actually very few people are. And a lot of people are thrilled by space. Maybe it has something to do with new satellite connections that make their social media more exciting. So that's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about what it really takes to prepare the human mind. So there isn't enough people that are thinking, what is it really going to be like for the humans and how are they going to survive it? It's not an issue that's enough people think is important. And then also there is, of course, the danger related to it. So any established program would have to be extremely careful about being involved in any kind of program that had an element of danger in it. I saw one analog program that was advertised as no danger at all, the safest analog you can do. And then I got the idea, wait a minute, I'm going to call mine the most dangerous analog. I'm going to call mine the most skilled, most dangerous program. This is what my program is. So if you even want to think about it, you better know that this is dangerous. And there's things, even with the most seaworthy boat in the world, and I've proved it, we know that the forces of nature and the forces of the ocean can overcome anything that man makes.
Mother Nature
Therefore,
always wins.
you have to
Absolutely.
accept the danger of it and what could happen. And this kind of thing might be difficult for people to endorse and put their name on, which I had that problem with the longest sea voyage in history. So I had a lot of sponsors help me and a lot of people helped me, but no one put their name officially on it. Because what if they hadn't and something would have happened to me? It would have ruined the image of their company, you know? So it was hard for me to get a sponsor like that, or for other people to step up and really say, this is important and I believe that he's going to succeed. How can people believe in someone succeeding at the impossible or something that no one's ever done, you know?
Yeah. We're so fixated on image today. People are unable to be genuine. Kind of back to your conversation earlier, I think you were mentioning something about, fear of what would happen to someone's career, the publicity that would get out that may impact a company or shareholders. And I just think in general, everyone is so hesitant to not only put themselves out there, but everyone is so worried and so judgmental that it's hard for us to evolve when we're so stuck in like this antiquated thinking of, oh, what is everybody else gonna think? And you know I don't know, I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I just think there's too much emphasis put in worrying about what everybody else thinks and how it's going to affect the company and the brand and the business, and not enough emphasis on doing it, just taking that step, taking that leap of faith, and not worrying or saying, you know what, I don't care, right? Kind of like that little bit of an Elon Musk attitude in a way, right? I don't care. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And maybe that mindset, I feel like generations in the past, they didn't ask for permission. They just did things. And that's the difference between society today. Everyone's looking for permission. Everyone's looking for the okay. There's certain things, frankly, that I would like to talk about on these podcasts, right? But I think to myself, well, hey, you need to be careful, right? You need to be careful what you say and what topics you introduce, because unfortunately today your livelihood can be impacted very easily, very quickly, by individuals who have no relationship to you, and that holds us back. It forces people to be disingenuine, and I just think that that's a challenge that really holds back our evolution, particularly to go amongst the stars. We can't bring these same problems, these same thinking patterns to a new, what's the point of bringing that to a new planet? What's the point of bringing that thinking? Why leave, right? Why not just stay here where all of the creature comforts are, right? Why focus on these challenges if we're just going to bring that same thinking and mentality somewhere else? And that's why I think we need to evolve.
Well, that would solve a lot of problems everywhere if people evolved. And I think that evolution also implies realizing that we're all one, that everybody is more alike than we are different. We're all so much alike, and we're all one. We all have the same aspirations and need love and have the same human characteristics and breathe air. We're all one. And when you realize we're all one, then you treat everyone better. And that is part of what it's like to become more aware. And we want, as much as possible, enlightened, wise people to lead the way as we evolve off of the earth. And that will set the standards for things.
In space travel, that's called the overview effect, and that's written about a lot, where you have experience of astronauts who have left Earth's orbit, and they're looking back down on Earth, and they're realizing that from space there are no borders, right? That
Yes.
this small blue dot that's hovering in the middle of this vastness is all the life that there is, and that experience changes people.
Yes.
And there's a lot of talk about how if more individuals could experience the overview effect, that may change or evolve our consciousness and our thinking.
The overview effect, I think, was first coined that by Frank White. I don't know, maybe back in the 80s, and he wrote a book about it. And it really amazes me that the astronauts that go up 20 and 30 years later are marveling at the overview effect. You know why it amazes me? Because they should be trained in that before they go, so that when they go, they already know how to live the overview effect in their being, and from that grow. So they should be all trained in experiencing the overview effect before they go, so they'll be more enlightened, so that when they go, they get the overview effect and they're able to use that for more and greater things. So each time that I hear about an astronaut expressing the overview effect or this grand vision that they have, big things they're thinking, I'm going, well, oh my God, why wasn't that person trained that 20 years ago? Why are they sending them up? And then they find it out for themselves because it's so important. It's very...
Why does it take that experience for someone to realize that we're all connected?
Yeah, right. So they should be...
It sounds silly when you think about it, right?
Yeah. That's something that that is part of the training, and it's part of my program. And I get around to that with some of the people who are capable enough on the boat to talk about this, but to really experience the overview effect, and especially if you're not up there, you have to have some control over your mind. You have to stop your mind from chattering and thinking all your worldly thoughts, so that your mind can, so that your being can lift out of your mind a bit and see the overview effect. And that's why it's hard for people to do, because they haven't had experience meditating, learning how to stop the chatter in your mind.
Yeah.
And that keeps you from experiencing these things. So stopping the chatter in the mind, that's why when I wrote about it, I put, but let's learn about concentration first. Concentration would imply you're using your intellectual mind to set a goal upon yourself. I'm going to use my intellectual mind. I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to try not to let myself talk about trivia in front of these other people on this Mars analog. So concentration comes first. If I can get the people to stop talking trivia, then I can teach them what meditation is, and then I can guide them to have the overview effect. I know that I've done it. I've been a teacher in this sort of thing. I've taught a lot of people how to do this and about the overview effect. And also, the question would come up, how did I live over 3 years at sea and not get sick? How did I not have mental worries? How did I perform at a super athletic level? And how did I heal myself? So the people that are on the way to Mars need to really be experts at these kind of things. And these are the kind of things that I can teach them, but I can also put them in touch with other people who are teaching these kind of things. But this sort of mind thinking, this sort of mindset has to be brought to the forefront of preparing people to go to Mars. You need to be a healer, or else you're going to sit there and you're going to let your mind wander, and it's going to give you a pain in your stomach, and you're going to wonder what it is, and you're going to cause something to your body.
Yeah.
And I feel that because I know that there's a lot of men stronger than me and way smarter than me who are better sailors, but they can't go out to sea for very long because they're afraid. And because they haven't come into touch with their whole self. So they're afraid of what they don't know and what could happen. And this is an important thing too. They're afraid of what might happen to their finances while they're out there experiencing the overview effect. They're not tending to their finances and their retirement. And that's something that you have to leave behind in order to become one with your larger self and with the universe, and to have greater capacities. So you have to not worry about your security as a small ego material being in the society. And you have to realize you can't take it with us when we die, and we can't take it with us when we go to Mars, because you're going to need
There's no gold bars on Mars.
You're going to need to, you're going to have to use the best of your capabilities to be the best person you can. That's why I've always seen my Mars programs and the teaching for the Mars programs as being something that it's not just for people who want to go to Mars. It's just for how to be a better human and how to realize your higher capacities. In the process of realizing your higher capacities, you realize your responsibility to give more than you take, and your responsibility to help enlighten other people. So that's a lot what this program is about, and why it's important for society all across the board, and why people from every country and from every walk of life can be inspired by it. When, after the voyage, we made an expedition to the jungle rivers of Guyana for various reasons. But while we were up there, we took a boat ride with a friend way up the jungle river, and then onto a little jungle river. And we went onto the little jungle river to his grandparents' fruit farm. And so we had to walk in the jungle and then cross a wooden board that was across a little creek. And when we got there, we met this old couple who had this fruit farm isolated in the jungle. And we started talking to them, and they said, well, what do you do? We told them what we did. I told them who I was. And they said, I heard about this person that did this and that and this, and it was so inspirational to us. And then they started describing it, and I realized they had heard about me. They were the Muslims living in the deepest part of the jungle who were inspired by my story. So I'm saying that that was an example to me of how this story is good for everyone in every walk of life, no matter what their religion is, no matter what their education is. People can find something in it that inspires them and makes them remember it.
If there's one lesson you could take away from all of this to share with someone who's maybe interested in participating, what advice would you have for them?
To be inspired to think about doing something good as you can for humanity at large is a good state of mind. And I remember one of your questions, and it was, how did I overcome my fear? So I'm in a storm at night, and the boat is being tossed wildly about, and I'm strapped in my bed so I won't fall out. And I hear dripping and splashing and leaking everywhere. And I'm thinking, is my boat sinking? And I'm thinking, well, no, it hasn't gotten water in it yet. I got a bilge alarm, so the water's not coming in. So I have to tell myself that I'm okay. I'm not going to die at this moment. And then I say, well, what am I doing here? And then I say, is what I'm doing good for humanity and my fellow man? Am I doing something important and good for my fellow man, my fellow human? And then I started saying, yes, I am, for these reasons. And then I said, well, okay, then I'm at the right place at the right time. And that's a lot how I overcame my fear, by thinking it over real well and saying, am I doing something good for humanity? And that's what took my fear away. So that would answer people in general. And so for someone coming on the boat, this is that sort of test where you can put yourself in a positive, enlightening environment to overcome any fears that you have. And from this experience, that you would grow into a more evolved person who knows themselves better and able to function in the world better. That's what this program offers.
That's incredible. Where do you see the program in the future?
In the future, we know that more and more people are going to go up into space, and they'll have to take training. So I see the program growing, and I see it growing in a big way. And like I already said, once the program is growing and it's endorsed by the space community and those who are actually preparing the people to go, then more people will know they'll have to take the program. And then as more people know that, then we would expand our program worldwide, like I said, because places like Dubai, for example, that's spending an enormous amount of money on Mars analog and trying to get into the space community, and they want to help colonize Mars. There should be a Mars analog program there to educate their people and to take their future astronauts and their analog astronauts out for the real test at sea between the stars. So that means it would take place I'd like to see it take place in China too. China doesn't have another man with experience like me or a program like this. So I would like to see the program in China too. And in any country that has a seaport, that has a space program, should have a Mars analog program. So I could see it growing into having many boats and many captains and many people skilled enough to run this program as the demand got greater for more people to be properly prepared to go.
That's incredible. Well, thank you, Reid. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. I think this is a really cool story. I could definitely see myself participating in one of these analogs, and I think it would be a great experience to really embody that time out at sea.
Thanks for having me on, and thank you for being supportive of my alternative point of view and program.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
The secrets of the past, they hoarded. Now we just boarded on our futuristic spacecraft. No mistakes, black is our music we must take back.